Welcome back, listeners, to the BizBlend podcast, where business meets mindset and strategy blends with the soul. I'm your host, Sana, and today in this episode, and this is one of my favorite topics, we are diving deep into something that resonates with so many high achievers, especially the connection between mental health and business performance. So, since the pandemic, listeners, the incredible number of professionals, they have kind of felt the call to leave the corporate world and go independent. It's kind of the journey I have had a year back. But becoming a solopreneur, someone who runs their own business without partners or employees, it is so much more than just updating your LinkedIn title. Trust me, listeners. And joining us today is the remarkable Liz Steblay. She's the founder and chief advocate of Professional Independent Consultants of America, which is PICA. She's the CEO of Proko Agency and author of Succeeding as a Solopreneur: Six Keys to Taking the Leap. She's also the author of Winning Clients and, oh, sorry, so that's the title: Succeeding as a Solopreneur: Six Keys to Taking the Leap, Winning Clients, and Building Wealth. Now, with over a decade of experience helping professionals step confidently into solopreneurship, Liz is here to guide us through the highs, the challenges, and in fact, how mental health plays pivotal role in sustaining both personal well-being and then your business performance. So, if you are a solopreneur or if you're a founder or anyone who is wondering how to manage your mental wellness while running your own show, or how to thrive when there is fear, uncertainty, or doubt creeping in, this conversation is for you. So with that, Liz, welcome to the show, and it is such an honor to having you with us.
It's a pleasure to be here. This is my favorite topic.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, Liz, let's straight away get to the mental health and business intersection. So, you have coached a lot of solopreneurs, thousands of solopreneurs. From your experience, I would love to know, how does mental health directly impact business performance? Especially for those stepping out on their own.
Yes. It's not I'll be this is counterintuitive, but I'll be very direct and say that being self-employed is not the right career choice for everyone. And I used to lead a webinar every month called "Is Solopreneurship the Right Path for Me?" I'm taking a break from running those webinars right now, but I would open that webinar and say, my job in the next 45 minutes is to talk you out of becoming self-employed, even though I am the expert at how to be successfully self-employed. And the reason that I try to talk people out of it is because it's the hardest job you'll ever have. It can be the most rewarding job you'll ever have and probably will be, but it's also the hardest because you have to continually learn new things, expand your boundaries, do things you've never done before, like negotiating a contract or something, pricing your own rates. And it takes an enormous amount of confidence and fortitude to do it successfully.
That is counterintuitive, but it is the hard truth, or it's pragmatic, because 2 years back, uh, I, along with my co-host Avik, we kind of started 3 years back, and Avik has been into solopreneurship journey, and I kind of had multiple conversations with him on this. And initially, I kind of thought, okay, solopreneurship is not for me, because practically speaking, I wouldn't be able to take such a huge risk, putting everything on stake, and go out there confidently doing everything on my own. So I absolutely resonate with what you said right now. So
Yes, exactly. A lot of people think that after a layoff is the best time to step out on your own. And it might be because typically, particularly in the United States, when you get laid off, you'll get a severance.
Mm.
So you'll have some money coming in for uh, hopefully several weeks afterwards, which is wonderful because that helps with your cash flow, right? Because it takes a little while to line up your first client and get the bills, submit your invoices and get them paid. But
Mhm.
if you step into being self-employed after a layoff and you're not in the right headspace, it could be a disaster. I'm reminded of the time that my brother was laid off. He's older than me, and at the time he was probably in his late 50s. And I said, "Jeff, maybe you should just become a consultant back to your industry because you'd worked in this industry for so long and you were very good at it." And he says, "I don't know, sis, who's going to hire a middle-aged white guy?" And I said, "Well, nobody with that attitude." So your mental outlook has everything to do with whether or not you will be successful when you're self-employed. The very first chapter of my book,
Mhm.
there's 6 keys to success, as you mentioned earlier. The very first chapter is be prepared to vanquish FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Because fear, uncertainty, and doubt, when you're thinking about being self-employed, is larger than life. I mean, we all have it instinctively, it's there to protect us from charging lions, right? But when you're in a full-time job and you're thinking about making the leap to being self-employed, that little I call it the FUD monster, that little imaginary creature that sits on your shoulder and whispers in your ear, "Who are you, Sana, to step out on your own? You're nuts to leave a full-time paycheck. And what about the benefits? And you don't know anything about pricing your services or negotiating a contract." So that we've all had that little voice. And before you make the leap to being self-employed, it's larger than life. And you need to learn to manage that monster, the FUD monster. And I'm here to tell you, I've been self-employed, a solopreneur now for 21 years. It never fully goes away. So you have to learn how to live with the FUD too.
Mm. That's creative. That's kind of, gives that creative flip to otherwise a very scary, dark, unknown side there. I mean, yeah, honestly speaking, but Liz also, there's this noise, and this has been for quite a long time that it's kind of glorified. Um, on social media or the resources everywhere, or you hear from people that, okay, as a solopreneur you'll get to control everything. You'll get control your time, you'll control your resources, you'll kind of get that opportunity to balance your personal and professional life. And then there's a whole lot of this motivation available on social media. How exactly do you think we can filter out that, even if we are, deep down in our subconscious or in our heart, we are considering to be a solopreneur?
Yeah, social media, honestly, and it's not even social media. It's everywhere in the movies and everywhere. Everybody thinks there's, well, look at that solopreneur, that entrepreneur. He's an overnight success. Well,
Mm.
yeah, and not in the 20 years he put into his career and expertise prior to being self-employed. There's no such thing as an overnight success. And like most things in social media, it's all what's the expression? Unicorns and rainbows.
Yeah.
Yeah,
uh,
it's
but
it's hard work. It's hard work for everybody, no matter how talented you are. So it's how to tame those images and that constant noise from uh, that we see in social media and in the press and in our news feeds. You just got to know that there's a lot of hard work between anybody who looks like they're just crushing it effortlessly.
absolutely, absolutely. And I can 500% vouch for that, that it's not easy, because especially after 3 years back, after I saw my friend got laid off, and then starting everything from on. Although on outside he looked very confident and determined, but deep down there was a fear. There was a fear, Liz, that What if everything, maybe this month I'm able to pay my bills, I'm able to survive. What about next month? What if I don't get any deals, or I don't win any clients? I don't have, anything. So there's lot of stake here. And um it directly affects your mental health and physical health as well. And then there is once again the cascading effect of, completely putting yourself into it, where you just, the boundaries are, diluted. You just, completely throughout the day, throughout the night, you focus on, you forget to, come back to yourself, or you forget your family members or your friends. So, Liz, how do you advise people to protect their mental space while still embarking on that path to drive business success?
Yes, just because it's called solopreneurship doesn't mean you need to do it alone. And in fact, you
Mhm.
shouldn't do it alone.
Mm.
So let me explain a little bit what that is. So in my book, I do mention that you first place to start is with a very clear statement of why. Why are you taking this path? And not just to have more flexibility, but to really think through how it might affect your whole life, the quality of your relationships at home, your stress levels, your health, your environment. Some people really thrive best when they're in an office with other people. As a solopreneur, you're not going into an office with other people. So I encourage people to think through all of the different angles of stepping into being self-employed. And then you take, I call it the North Star document. Then you take that and you have a discussion about that with someone very close to you, whether it's your spouse, your adult child, your best friend, and you need to ask their opinion is, do you think this is the right path for me? Do you think this is the right thing? And are you willing to support me through this? Because I'm stepping into unknown territory and I don't know how it's going to work out. And I need you to be like my board of directors, right?
Mm.
Help keep me on track. There used to be an old saying that behind every successful man was a woman. I think that's back from the 18 and 1900s.
Yeah. Yeah.
But now in today's world, behind every successful person is another person, right? So you need to have your support group in place. Also, find your own community of other solopreneurs. I mean, it's great to have your spouse in your corner, but if your spouse has never been self-employed, they're not going to understand the stresses and the emotions that you're going through. And so this is one of the things that has been very rewarding about leading the Professional Independent Consultants of America is I hold office hours once a week, and sometimes PICA members come and they come to my office hours. It's all via Zoom, of course. And they say, I don't really have a particular question. I'm just feeling FUD. I've got fear, uncertainty, and doubt again, or I'm feeling disconnected and I wanted to talk shop and just and reconnect and make sure I'm on the right path. And so it's helpful to have a community, whether it's me at PICA or other solopreneurs or your local chamber of commerce, but other people in business that can help you with when you do hit those tough weeks or tough times. And believe me, you will.
Mm. Mm. No, that is super, super important, apart from having that support of your um family members, or your spouse, or any, friend maybe,
Yes.
or ex-colleague, or your, sometimes an ex-boss as well. I think it's really, really communities, it plays such an important role. And definitely, I think this is really, really such a great way to foster connection, and also help everyone maintain emotional well-being among each others. And
Yeah.
also.
Sana, two other things that I have, two practices that I have done.
Mhm.
One is, and I've been doing this for probably 15, 16 years, is I start every day just with 10 minutes of sitting and paying attention to my thoughts. Some people would call this meditation. That, I don't if I call it meditation, I think that I'm doing it wrong. So basically, it's just breathing and sitting for 10 minutes. And some of my best ideas and my clarity of focus has come in those 10 minutes. It's been really remarkable, and it keeps me centered on what's important. And then the other thing that I do before I get out of bed is I think, what are the top 3 things I want to get done today? Because when you're self-employed, the list of things to do is tremendous. It's so long. There's always too much to do. Some things are long-term projects, some things are short, like, okay, I need to get my invoices out, but doesn't matter, 3 things. Now, the reason it's only 3 things is because I don't need to write them down. I can hold 3 things in my mind, and it doesn't need to be 3 big things. Sometimes it's a simple thing like, "Oh, I definitely need to make that dentist appointment. I need to get my invoices out, and I need to write the blog for next month." Well, writing the blog for next month is more than a 10-minute task, right? So sometimes it's small things and a big thing. Doesn't matter, but when after I've done those 3 things for that day, I feel like I've accomplished something, and then I can tackle the other things on my list. And having that sense of accomplishment every day helps keep me from feeling like I'm just running on a treadmill or spinning my wheels or running in place. It helps me feel like I'm really making progress towards things.
Mm. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Liz. Thanks for sharing that. And in business, or when we try to analyze the journey of an entrepreneur or a business, we often talk about the slippery slopes there. So, Liz, what kind of slippery slopes have you observed, especially with respect to solopreneurs, which, you would mindfully, which you would advise the budding solopreneurs out here listening to this conversation to be mindful about? I mean, even if is there or not.
Yeah, there's 2 that come to mind. One is related to cash flow and one is related to pricing.
Okay.
So for cash flow, this is the hardest part about being self-employed, is because when you're an employee, you're used to a steady paycheck. When you're
Mm.
self-employed, yeah, not so much. It doesn't, even if you invoice a client on the first of the month and they say they're going to pay you by the 30th of the month, something always goes wrong. That nothing ever runs like clockwork, especially if it's the very first invoice you ever submit to a client. So your cash flow is more like an earthquake Richter scale. It's gonna be up and down and up and down. In the years that I was an independent consultant before I launched my 2 businesses, my cash flow ranged from $5,000 a month to $24,000 a month. Obviously, $24,000 is a good living in the United States, but you can't live as a single mom in San Francisco on $5,000 a month. So, that slippery slope of that rocky, erratic cash flow, and you don't wanna take on debt because that's where the slippery slope is. You need what you have to pay your credit card bills every month in full because once you start accruing interest, it's almost impossible to recover. And so you need to be able to manage that cash flow. That's why before you even go into being self-employed, you need to make sure you have anywhere from 4 to 6 months of money stocked away, set aside so that you can pay your bills while you're building and getting your first client and those first invoices paid because sometimes payment terms are very long. And what I recommend for people in the United States is to apply for and secure a home equity line of credit if they have their own home. You might not need it, but it'll give you peace of mind to know it's there. So that's what related to cash flow. The other slippery slope around pricing, this is probably the single biggest mistake I see people make when they step into being self-employed is they don't price enough for their services. Uh, there's a whole chapter in the book about how to figure out what your what your baseline rate should be, and then whether or not it's time to switch to a packaged or fixed price or even hybrid pricing. But the slippery slope related to pricing is a lot of times people think, oh, I'm going to price my services low or I'm going to discount my services so that I can get my foot in the door and then I'll raise my prices. It
Mhm.
very rarely works that way. Once you're in with a client and they're used to paying you, let's say you discount your services to $150 an hour and you say, oh, that was just my introductory price. Really, my rate is $225. That's going to feel disingenuous and erode trust with that client. So discounting your services I was going to say it's almost never is a good idea. But yes, that's definitely a slippery slope. Is you need to charge what you're worth, go in with confidence, and there are definitely some negotiating tips in the book as well. So here's a quick one for your listeners. It's best to quote a range of billing rates if you're quoting by the hour, or if you're doing packages, have three different levels. There's a principle in psychology called the center stage effect. And when people are given choices, they gravitate towards the middle. So when I was an independent consultant, I used to say my rate ranges from $175 to $225 an hour based on the scope, duration, and complexity of the work. And then I said, but let me put together a proposal. We've talked about a lot of things today. Let me get back to you in 2 days with how I would approach this work, and the price range will be somewhere in there. And then if I came in the middle, they thought it was fair. Never in 15 years did anybody ever push me down towards the bottom end of my range. So that's a super practical tip right there. Quote a range, or if you do it like an executive coach, quote a package A, B, or C, and because people will gravitate towards the middle. But don't discount your rate. That is definitely a slippery slope.
Wow. Wow. That is super, super helpful. Super helpful. So before we wrap up, Liz, there is just one quick contradictory, not exactly contradictory, but could be a different viewpoint. You know, maybe some of the listeners would believe that, okay, if I focus too much on my mental health, I have that fear that it can make me slow down in the decision making or maybe risk taking, because it's kind of like, in a generic sense, talking that the higher risks you take, the better, maybe less there are chances of getting that huge success. So what would you say to someone who fears that prioritizing well-being, mental health, might make them less competitive in the business world?
No, Sana, I think the reverse is true. I think by having a strong mental health and being centered is opens up more opportunities for you to properly evaluate risks and trade-offs and go for it. I'm one of the biggest risk takers I've ever met. I've been skydiving, I've been bungee jumping, I ride a motorcycle, I do downhill skiing. I'm 61. Okay, so all my whole life I've been an adventurous, risk-taking person. But I've also been self-employed and extremely stressed out at times. There's some stories in the book about when life was too much and I ended up in a puddle on the floor crying, and how did I pull myself back out of that. So I don't think it's an either or. I think it's a yes and. I don't think you have to have either a hard charging, risk taking career or mental health. I think it's yes and you can have both.
You are walking the talk, Liz.
Well, I have lived it, so there's that.
Ah, great. Okay, so before we wrap up, Liz, of course, if our listeners would like to get a hold of your book and also explore about uh, PICA, and your resources, connect with you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah. Unfortunately, my name is difficult to spell, and so is the title of the book. Succeeding as a Solopreneur is hard to spell. So I created a landing page for both finding out more about me and the book and PICA, everything else. So this is easy to remember, and it's 6keys.info. It can be the number 6, it can be the word 6, but 6keys.info, not .com, because that was way too expensive, and I'm all about keeping expenses low. So 6keys.info is the best place to find more about me, about PICA, about the book, about my mentorship programs. That's the landing page.
Fair. That is super smart, Liz. Great. I'll have the link in the show notes in there for our listeners. And thank you, Liz, for giving us such a practical yet refreshing take on solopreneurship, especially the intricate dance between mental health and business success, who are uh, right now navigating this path alone. They could be, but you are not alone, listeners. Especially, I'm talking to all the solopreneurs out there. You're not alone. There are people, there are resources. Just hover to the show notes along with this episode and check out Liz's website, her book, and her all resources on 6keys.info. And also, once again, thank you so much, Liz.
Thank you.
Okay, so listeners, a quick concluding take from my end. So, if you are considering taking the leap or you are already embarked on this journey, don't do it alone. Find support, take care of your mental wellness, and trust that sustainable success comes from both performance and peace of mind. Until next time, keep blending your business acumen with mindful living right here on BizBlend. Thank you.